Hey guys, buckle up, or rather, unbuckle everything, because tonight we're ditching the photon rodeo and the spacetime calisthenics. Nope, we're on a deluxe first-class ticket to Snoozeville, escorted by a VIP sheep with a PhD in chill. Picture the vibe. The air is 40% old paper, 30% pipe tobacco, 29% did I leave the stove on, and 1% mysterious meadow freshness that definitely isn't coming from the radiator. Poof, you've teleported into Albert Einstein's Berlin study, 1928. Congratulations, you're now drowning in a think tank so dense it has its own event horizon. The walls are basically a library that ate another library and is still hungry. Every shelf is flexing with unanswered questions, flexing harder than a barda builder at the beach. Survival odds, 1 measly star out of 5. Cause of death, existential dread, with a side of weight, is gravity even real? You'd think the room would smell like chalk dust and panic, but no, there's a rogue grassy whisper sneaking in like nature's prank call. Somewhere in the corner, a suspiciously zen sheep is side-eyeing the cosmos and winning. This isn't just any sheep. This is Unitarian, the woolly Yoda of inner peace, quietly chewing the cud of enlightenment while Einstein tries to unify the universe and fails to unify his laundry. So grab a blanket, mute your inner overachiever, and let's follow this fluffy philosopher into the unified field of shut-eye. Warning, side effects may include sudden urges to count yourself instead of sheep, profound naps, and the overwhelming realization that maybe the universe's biggest secret is that it just wants a hug. Shadows stretch across the bookshelves like sleepy, complicated cats that know too much about differential geometry. The only sound is the scratch of a pen, and more importantly, a steady, soft, chewing sound coming from the corner. You look over. Einstein is not looking at you. He is staring intently at a drawing on his desk. It's not an equation. It's a charcoal sketch of a remarkably plump, placid sheep with eyes that seem to hold the serene wisdom of the universe, or perhaps the serene wisdom of having recently found a perfect patch of clover. This is where our journey begins. You are here, standing respectfully near a stack of papers that likely contain the secrets of the cosmos, but the focus of the moment is entirely on a piece of livestock art. The drawing is a representation of his current, highly unusual research assistant, a real live sheep named Unitarian, who is currently occupying a rather luxurious hay bale near the window. The sheep is the key. The great mind of the 20th century, the man who dissolved the Newtonian clockwork universe, is being anchored and occasionally advised by a humble, woolly creature. This particular sheep, Unitarian, and its ancestor before it, served a purpose that went far beyond mere companionship. Einstein, like many physicists of the era, was struggling to achieve his grandest vision, the unified field theory, UFT. He wanted to link the two great forces he knew, gravity and electromagnetism, into a single, elegant equation. It was the ultimate pursuit of monism, the philosophical idea that all of reality is ultimately one unified whole. And what better symbol for this ultimate unity, in the chaotic, post-war intellectual climate of Germany, than a single, perfectly focused sheep? The idea is, frankly, hilarious, but also genuinely effective. When his mind became a Gordian knot of tensors and field equations, he had to find a way to force simplicity. His usual method was mental, focusing on a single, continuous object. And what object is more continuous, more self-contained, than a sheep counting only itself? The sketch on the desk, you realize, is not just a drawing, it's an intellectual placeholder. It reminds him to stop trying to force the universe into his schema and simply observe the easy, repetitive truth of being. The air feels heavy with ambition and genius, but the corner where Unitarian resides is a bubble of tranquil simplicity, smelling sweetly of hay and the mild lanolin of fresh wool. The contrast is immediate. The vast complexity of the UFT papers next to the utter, unadulterated simplicity of the sheep's rhythmic chewing. You watch as Einstein reaches out and lightly taps the sketch, a small, wry smile crossing his face. He's thinking not of the speed of light, but of the speed of a sheep's jaw movement, a predictable, comforting cycle. You may not be able to follow his physics, but you can certainly follow the flow of his thoughts here, from the infinite complexity of the stars to the finite, gentle rhythm of the barnyard. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, following the quiet, unifying path of the monist sheep. This fluffy, four-legged philosophical guide is about to lead you, and perhaps a certain genius, into a much-needed, unified field of sleep. You watch as Einstein gently places the charcoal sketch back down, allowing his gaze to shift from the drawing to the real-life Unitarian, who is now meticulously inspecting a particularly promising bit of straw. The air here, despite the heavy intellectual weight, is remarkably still around the hay bale. It's a sensory anchor, a physics laboratory for stillness. The fluffy dilemma, you realize, is this: how do you force a mind that specializes in the non-intuitive, the bending of space, the relativity of time, to accept the singular, irreducible nature of reality? The sheep, Unitarian, is the answer. It's an exercise in monism made manifest through wool and quiet digestion. Einstein didn't just like the sheep. He used its existence as a metaphysical tool. Think about it. General relativity and electromagnetism were, to Einstein, like two entirely separate, beautiful poems written in different languages, one describing the heavy, slow dance of planets, the other the fast, jittery flicker of light. His life's goal was to show they were actually two stanzas of the same poem. He was looking for the unified field, the single, grand truth. And when the equations turned into a sprawling, impossible mathematical forest, he needed something utterly simple to pull him back to the core concept, unity. The sheep provides that. It is one animal. It has one purpose right now: chew, breathe, be. It is not complex. It is not divisible in its focus. It represents the very thing the theory demands: singularity of being. If Einstein could unify the focus of his mind around the sheep's calm, singular rhythm, he believed he could open the door to unifying the fundamental forces. It's a beautifully mad, profoundly simple psychological trick. You move closer, noticing that Unitarian is entirely unfazed by the greatest intellect of the age pacing near its hay. The animal, in its blissful ignorance of tensor calculus, is operating on pure monist efficiency. There is no internal debate, no crisis of identity, no struggle with the limitations of the speed of light. Unitarian is simply being. This sheep, you muse, is the anti-puzzle. It's the moment the scientist forces himself to stop questioning and start simply accepting the observable truth of the animal's continuity. When Einstein's equations would sprawl across the blackboard like a chaotic spiderweb, he would pause, look at Unitarian, and begin a simple mental exercise, counting the sheep's slow, steady breaths. not counting to fall asleep, but counting to unify, counting from one to one to one again and again. It's a form of historical mindfulness, centuries before the term became trendy. Most modern folks wouldn't make it past breakfast without checking their digital distractions, but Einstein, in the 1920s, had Unitarian, a woolly, breathing, physical notification to just be one. It's a testament to his dry humor, too. Imagine the great physicist, surrounded by colleagues arguing over quantum entanglement, thinking, yes, but have you considered the meditative qualities of my monist ruminant? The sensory details here are vital, the soft, continuous clop-clop of the sheep's jaw as it re-chews, the gentle swoosh of its exhale, the mild, earthy smell that cuts through the metallic tang of old ink. These sounds are not noise, they are a rhythmic, consistent background field. They are the anti-chaos, the steady state against which the turbulence of subatomic particles and curved spacetime can be measured. You realize this is not a pet, it is a living philosophical prop. It's the gentle push that stops his mind from scattering into 1,000 confusing pieces. And while the world sees him as a detached, cerebral genius, you, the quiet observer in the Berlin study, see him as a man deeply dependent on a simple, fluffy embodiment of the unity he seeks. This whole setup is essentially a very low-tech, high-concept brain reset button. We need to understand where this surprisingly potent philosophical sheep actually came from. Unitarian, calmly contemplating the nature of hay in Berlin, is not an ordinary farm animal. To trace its lineage is to delve into one of the more charmingly obscure corners of German history, the Bavarian Schafzüchterverein, Sheep Breeding Association, for the promotion of natural unity. This is not a detail you read in standard Einstein biographies. It's the kind of curious footnote that only emerges when you start asking about the provenance of his livestock. This association, founded in the late 19th century near Munich, wasn't just about breeding prize-winning wool. It was based, bizarrely, on the teachings of the famous German biologist and philosopher, Ernst Haeckel. Haeckel was a towering figure in his time, a zealous popularizer of Darwin and the intellectual father of monism in Germany. His philosophy held that everything, mind, matter, spirit, physics, life, was fundamentally one single, interconnected substance governed by natural laws. No dualism, no separation, just one big, beautiful, unified reality. The sheep farmers who formed this unique verein took this idea quite literally. They believed that if a creature could be bred and trained to embody singular focus and perfect continuity, it would become a living, breathing demonstration of Haeckel's unity. They weren't breeding for meat or maximum wool yield. They were breeding for maximum calmness and unwavering repetitiveness. Imagine the annual meetings. Instead of discussing fleece quality, they were arguing about the philosophical implications of a ewe's grazing pattern. They had a specific criterion for a monist sheep. The animal had to be able to stand in an open field, utterly alone, and only count itself. This sounds utterly ridiculous, of course, but it was a serious exercise in applying philosophy to animal husbandry. The animal that could maintain the steadiest rhythm of chewing, the most consistent respiration rate, and the most profoundly blank and peaceful stare, was deemed the most monist. This is the hidden historical grounding beneath Unitarian's placid exterior. The sheep in Einstein's study is the culmination of decades of highly specific, philosophically motivated breeding. Its ancestors were selected not for their swiftness or their size, but for their ability to stand perfectly still and embody the truth of one. It's a beautifully simple, if slightly nutty, piece of forgotten history. Most of these farmers, the association's records show, were deeply worried about the fragmentation of modern life, the rise of specialized science, the chaos of industrialization, the sheer noise of the early 20th century. The sheep was their quiet protest, their soft, woolly emblem of unity. The humor here is inherent. The most complex mind in physics is relying on the least complex creature, bred by the most overly serious, philosophically intense farmers in Bavaria. When you look at Unitarian now, chewing its straw, you're not just seeing a sheep. You're looking at a living, four-legged argument against dualism, patiently waiting for a physicist to catch up to its inherent simplicity. The gentle, repetitive sound of its chewing is the sound of decades of dedicated, slightly eccentric breeding paying off in the most unexpected way, by calming the mind that was trying to invent the future. You are safe here, in this quiet corner, bathed in the warmth of the study, listening to the rhythm of philosophical perfection. You are still in the quiet bubble of the Berlin study, absorbing the strange, historical reality of the monist sheep. To truly appreciate Unitarian's purpose here, you need to understand the training regimen of the Bavarian Schafzüchterverein. It wasn't just about breeding for calm. It was about training for philosophical demonstration. The association, in its wonderfully dry German way, had codified the training of a monist sheep into 3 simple, yet profound, steps. The goal was to prove through livestock that the material world, the sheep's body, and the mental world, its instinctual focus, were perfectly unified. First, the principle of singular graze. The chosen sheep was consistently fed only the most homogeneous, boring grass or hay. No sudden bursts of flavor, no stimulating variety. The goal was to eliminate external distractions and minimize the dualism of choice. The sheep's focus had to be on the continuous, repetitive act of consumption, not the choice of what to consume. This created a steady, uninterrupted loop of stimulus and response. Second, the repetitive observation exercise, the counting. This is the part that is most relevant to a person trying to fall asleep. The farmers would isolate the sheep and, using a highly polished copper mirror, train the animal's focus. The sheep, seeing only its own image, was, in their view, counting only itself. They believed that by focusing the animal's mind on the ultimate singularity, I am only one, it would achieve a state of perfect embodied monism. When Unitarian choose now, you are watching the final living product of this philosophical loop, the mind and the matter perfectly aligned in a singular, gentle rhythm. And third, and perhaps most amusingly, the silence protocol. The sheep were only ever addressed in low, monotonous tones, avoiding sharp, dualistic consonants. Only gentle, continuous mmm sounds were permitted, which the farmers noted the sheep often reciprocated. They were trying to cultivate a flock of auditory neutral ground, free from the choppy, chaotic demands of human language. All of this quiet, obsessive training resulted in an animal that was, quite frankly, a biological sleep aid. Its every movement, the slow, rhythmic twitch of an ear, the steady lift of its woolly chest with each breath, the continuous, soft grinding of hay, was a perfect, predictable loop. It's a historical metronome for the mind. The genius of Einstein's use of Unitarian lies here. He wasn't counting them to fall asleep. He was using the sheep's inherent, bred-in focus to anchor his own scattered thoughts. When the equations for a unified field would scatter into 1,000 variables, he'd look at the sheep. It simply was the unified field, a single, continuous entity, operating with perfect, quiet efficiency. The most complicated mind in the world found rest in the company of the animal that had been trained to be the most uncomplicated. It's a beautiful, dry joke played by history itself. The air is still, the sheep choose, and the great struggle for cosmic unity is, for this moment, reduced to the simple, soft sound of woolly breathing. We can't talk about the Monist Sheep Breeding Association without touching on one of their more ambitious and ultimately fruitless ventures. It's a marvelous little piece of forgotten bureaucratic history, a gentle anecdote that highlights the sheer seriousness with which these Bavarian farmers took their philosophical task. We're moving back slightly in time to the waning days of the German Empire before 1914. The association, feeling immensely proud of their success in breeding these serenely unified sheep, decided that their project was not just a pastoral curiosity, but a matter of national importance. They genuinely believed that a country struggling with industrialization, political division, and a rapidly changing world needed a physical, woolly demonstration of unity. This led to the drafting of a humble proposal for a Monist sheep census and national unification plan. The recipient, Kaiser Wilhelm Roman II himself. The letter, thankfully preserved in dusty regional archives, is a masterpiece of dry, philosophical earnestness. It wasn't about counting sheep for taxation or wartime supplies. No. The farmers suggested that every German citizen, particularly those stressed by the complexities of modern city life, should be given the opportunity to observe a certified Monist sheep for a period of 10 minutes daily. They argued that the sheep's perfect, rhythmic digestion and unwavering focus on its own singular existence would serve as a powerful, non-denominational spiritual antidote to the chaos of the age. The census wasn't a count of animals, but a count of moments of observation. They proposed a national registry to track how many hours the German populace spent watching the sheep. The humor, of course, is in the collision of their simple, woolly philosophy with the rigid, pompous grandeur of the imperial court. Can you imagine the scene? A frantic aide trying to explain to the Kaiser, a man obsessed with battleships, grand speeches, and his own glorious mustache, why a handful of sheep farmers think the country's salvation lies in staring at quiet livestock. The letter, predictably, was filed away under eccentric rural petitions and never reached the Kaiser's desk. The farmers, however, took the lack of reply not as a dismissal, but as a sign that their truth was too subtle and profound for the current dualistic political system. They simply doubled down on their quiet mission, continuing to breed for the perfect rhythmic chew. This anecdote gives you another layer of appreciation for Unitarian, quietly resting in Einstein's study. The sheep is carrying the weight of this entire forgotten philosophical movement. Its calm is not accidental. It's an act of historical persistence. And here is the subtle connection. Einstein, too, was seeking a singular, unifying truth that the fragmented, chaotic world seemed uninterested in accepting. He and the sheep were, in a strange way, philosophical comrades. The sheep shifts slightly on its hay bale, the rustle of the straw a soft, gentle sound against the silence of the great man's thinking. The Kaiser missed out on this profound, gentle truth, but you haven't. Settle into the soft rhythm of Unitarian's breathing. It is the steady, unified heartbeat of this quiet, improbable historical moment. We must now track the lineage of this unifying principle backward, away from the grand intellectual stage of 1928 Berlin, and into the comparatively modest life of the younger Albert Einstein in Bern, Switzerland. Specifically, we're looking for the ancestor of Unitarian, a quiet, unassuming named unitas, which is Latin for unity. The Monist Sheep Association, despite the Kaiser's indifference, continued its work. In the early 1900s, one of the association's founders, a man named Hermuller, became fascinated by the emerging theories of physics and the concept of relativity. While he couldn't grasp the math, he understood the philosophical demand for unity. He saw the young Einstein, working quietly in the Bern patent office, as a kind of intellectual kindred spirit, a man seeking singularity in the chaos of physical measurement. So, in the autumn of 1903, an extremely well-trained Unitas was packed into a sturdy wooden crate, labeled, of course, with a philosophical quotation about the indivisibility of nature, and anonymously shipped by rail from Bavaria to Bern. The accompanying note was short and cryptic, a guide for the observer of fields. Imagine the scene. Einstein, a young, often distracted patent clerk, receives a large, unexpected package. He unwraps it to find a sheep. Not a dog, not a cat, but a fully grown, intensely calm ewe, smelling faintly of clean hay, and we assume the philosophical conviction of monism. Most modern folks would simply call animal control. Einstein, however, with his lifelong appreciation for the unusual and the non-obvious, was immediately intrigued. He saw not a chore, but an empirical data point in living form. Unitas was, crucially, bred for the city. She was quiet, clean, and remarkably placid. She took up residence in a small, fenced-off patch of yard adjacent to his Bern apartment. Her presence was an immediate and profound contrast to the dry, repetitive work of assessing patent applications. Einstein was spending his days trying to describe the mechanics of other people's inventions, a decidedly dualistic endeavor of dividing and classifying. Unitas was the constant, soft, breathing reminder of the single, undivided reality he knew was out there. The sensory details here shift from the dusty gravitas of Berlin to the simple, fresh air of Bern. You are standing outside the young Einstein's window, the sound of the city muffled by the presence of this quiet animal. You hear the rhythmic, soft cropping of grass, a constant, measurable event in the universe. This animal was not merely a pet. It was an accidental, anonymous gift that perfectly addressed the young scientist's most profound philosophical need. It was a physical manifestation of the answer he was seeking in his equations: start with unity. The quiet rhythm of Unitas became the first anchor for the mind that would soon dissolve the absolute nature of time. It's a surprisingly heartwarming and very low-stakes moment in the history of science. You are now observing young Albert Einstein in Bern, around 1904. He's in a small, slightly cluttered apartment, still grappling with the daily grind of the patent office. The air is warm, the scent of pipe tobacco is faint, and the relentless ticking of a clock seems to mark his attempts to find a universal constancy. It's here that Unitas, the monist you, truly begins her work. Einstein was known for being absent-minded and often messy. He famously ignored basic things like wearing socks. This detail, the lack of socks, is a playful metaphor for his mind, always moving, never quite tethered to the ground, always skipping the necessary but mundane steps. Unitas, on the other hand, was the ultimate picture of grounded stability, always fully clad in her own perfectly tailored natural fleece. The young physicist discovered, purely by accident, the therapeutic power of Unitas's routine. While struggling with a particularly baffling patent application, something probably involving clockwork mechanisms, or perhaps an early, overly complicated washing machine, he found his eye continually drawn to the window and the small yard where Unitas grazed. He noticed the sheer, unwavering rhythm of her chewing. It wasn't a fast rhythm. It was a slow, deliberate, almost geological movement. Chew, pause, re-chew, pause. This repetitive pattern became a spontaneous focus point. When his thoughts would race, creating internal friction, a dualism of ideas, he would look at Unitas and focus his entire mind on her jaw movements. Here's the connection he made, and this is where the playful science comes in. Einstein was thinking a lot about the oscillation of an electron, its incredibly fast, predictable, repetitive movement. He realized that the sheep's slow, observable, repetitive movement was merely a scaled-up, macroscopic version of the same fundamental principle of the universe, cyclical, predictable recurrence. The electron's oscillation was fast and invisible. The sheep's chewing was slow and visible. Both, however, represented a singular, continuous loop. By linking the sheep's rhythmic chewing to the oscillation of an electron in his mind, he was performing a psychological act of unification. He was taking the enormous, messy concept of electromagnetism and grounding it in the simple, earthy reality of a woolly mammal's lunchtime. This is historical grounding wrapped in a lovely piece of absurdity. The great scientific breakthrough of the era, the dismantling of absolute time, was likely nurtured not only by complex thought experiments, but by the simple, continuous clop-clop-clop of Unitas's jaw. The sheep was the only constant, the only rhythm that truly felt trustworthy in a universe whose measurements were all turning out to be relative. You can almost hear his dry humor. Ah, yes, the electron. It is exactly like Unitas, only faster and less interested in clover. It's a perfect moment of gentle, productive absurdity. The inventor of the universe's speed limit found his mental anchor in an animal whose top speed was probably a brisk waddle. Settle in and let the quiet, cyclical sound of this historical chewing become your own rhythm. The constant presence of Unitas is the antidote to the intellectual speed and stress of the day. As you remain tethered to the young Einstein in Bern, focusing on the rhythmic chewing of Unitas, it's important to clarify the exact nature of the sheep's mathematical contribution. It wasn't that Unitas solved an equation. The mathematical principle the sheep embodied was not a formula, but a method, a unique psychological shortcut designed to achieve what the mathematicians call convergence. In physics and mathematics, convergence is the state where a series of steps or calculations approaches a single, definite limit or answer. When Einstein was stuck on a problem, and trust me, the work he was doing in 1905 was the definition of stuck, his mind would often diverge. His thoughts would spiral outward, considering every possible avenue, every potential contradiction, every philosophical consequence. This is great for brainstorming, terrible for reaching a solution. Unitas provided the perfect living algorithm for convergence. Imagine the sheep's chewing motion. It's the definition of an iterative process. Chew, re-chew, swallow, repeat. Each movement is fundamentally the same as the last, yet each advances the process of digestion toward a single, unified end. Einstein, by focusing on this simple, repeatable act, was training his mind to mimic that pattern. He wasn't counting the sheep in the typical sense. He was performing an applied meditative calculation. He was using the sheep's rhythm to mentally force his own sequence of thoughts to approach a single, steady point of rest. The brilliance here is in the repetition. The mind, when overstimulated, craves novelty. By forcing his attention onto an object of utterly unnovel, predictable, and continuous movement, he was tricking his own internal processor. He was reducing the vast, terrifying complexity of the universe into the one thing he could always count on, the slow, steady rhythm of Unitas's jaw. It's a beautifully simple form of mental relaxation through focused, iterative counting. This wasn't about the physics of a unified field. It was about the psychology of a unified mind. He understood that a clear answer often only arrives after the distracting noise, the internal chatter, the competing theories, has been eliminated. And what better noise cancellation system is there than a placid, woolly animal whose entire existence is a quiet, continuous loop? This subtle method of concentration is one of the most endearing and forgotten truths of Einstein's early creative process. He wasn't meditating in a conventional sense. He was simply letting the monist rhythm of his sheep overwrite the scattered chaos of his patent work and his theoretical struggles. You are observing a profound moment where the physical world, the sheep, informs the abstract world, the mathematics, through the simple, gentle power of repetition. Settle into that slow rhythm yourself. Let it pull your own scattered thoughts into a singular, restful point. Our journey now takes a brief, quiet detour back to the source, the Bavarian Schafsichverein, to uncover another layer of gentle absurdity and dedication, the sheep's hidden library. This isn't a library for the sheep, obviously, though given their philosophical training, you wouldn't entirely discount the possibility. This was a library about the sheep, or rather, the philosophy that governed their existence. You are mentally transported to a small, exceptionally tidy, but slightly dusty barn outside of Munich, where the Monist Association held their meetings. Tucked away behind a stack of clean hay bales, and concealed by an old, surprisingly well-crafted wooden panel, was their intellectual sanctum. The library was small, maybe 30 or 40 volumes total, but surprisingly well-stocked with the precise texts required for their peculiar form of philosophical farming. This wasn't a collection of agricultural journals. This was a curated selection of treatises on unity, metaphysics, and quiet observation. The star of the collection was, naturally, the collected works of Ernst Haeckel, their monist patron saint. But the shelf also held unexpected treasures. There were well-worn copies of Spinoza's Ethics, with marginalia that linked his concept of substance, the single, unified reality, to the consistency of a ewe's wool. There were texts by German idealists, heavily underlined with notes attempting to apply their complex concepts of continuity to the simple, unbroken flow of the sheep's day-to-day existence. There was even a surprising amount of ancient philosophy, a translation of Parmenides, who argued that reality is an unmoving, singular, unified whole, and that change or motion is merely an illusion. The farmers had interpreted this to mean that the perfect monist sheep should move as little as possible, which explained the intense breeding for placidity. The very existence of this hidden library is the kind of quirky little detail that makes history endearing. These were practical men, farmers, yet they were deeply serious about the metaphysical implications of their livestock. They believed that to properly train a sheep in monism, one must first be rigorously educated in the principle of unity oneself. The atmosphere in this imagined barn library is one of quiet, dusty reverence. It smells of hay, old leather bindings, and serious, but slightly misplaced, intellectual effort. It's a perfect historical irony. The most fundamental, earth-bound creature, the sheep, was being guided by the most abstract and complex philosophical ideas. Now, bring that knowledge back to the young Einstein in Bern. He may not have known about the hidden library, but he intuitively understood the principles its books contained. When he looked at Unitas, he was seeing the physical embodiment of Spinoza's substance, a singular, undeniable reality that cut through the dualistic clutter of his own mind. The sheep, in its quiet, unassuming way was a living footnote to the great philosophical tradition of unity. Settle deeper into the quietude of this realization, letting the contrast between complex ideas and simple will ease your mind. We return to Bern, to the young Albert Einstein and Unitas, the monist you, standing as a quiet, woolly sentinel against the backdrop of an accelerating world. This period, the early 1900s, was a time of immense, noisy change across Europe. Cities were industrializing, electric trams were clanging, factories were humming, and the telegraph was ticking relentlessly. It was a world becoming increasingly loud and fragmented. The sheep's presence became a vital counterbalance, a living symbol of pre-industrial continuity. Her breathing and rhythmic movements were a meditative anchor against the chaotic, new clockwork of the modern world. In his mind, Einstein was tearing apart the absolute nature of time and space, proving that simultaneity was relative and that the universe wasn't a rigid, mechanical box. And yet, to do this work, he needed an absolute, physical constant to hold onto, a personal, low-tech escape valve from the mental pressure. Unitas provided the clockwork of quiet. Unlike the loud, erratic machinery outside, or the complicated inner workings of a patented invention he had to assess, the sheep operated on a simple, ancient, and perfectly reliable cycle. Consider the sensory details, the soft clop-clop of the jaw, the long, slow whoosh of the exhale, the gentle scrape of a hoof against the dirt. These sounds were not variable. They did not speed up or slow down based on market forces or electrical currents. They were governed by the quiet, internal rhythms of a unified biological system. This was the real constant in his life, far more reliable than any pendulum clock that was being revealed as relative. This deliberate focus on the sheep's simple clockwork served a crucial function in his creative process. When the equations for relativity began to coalesce, they required a mind capable of holding on to fundamental, unmoving principles while simultaneously accepting radical change. The sheep's rhythm was the unmoving principle. It was the absolute point of continuity that allowed him the psychological freedom to break every other accepted continuity in physics. The playful irony here is that the man who revolutionized the concept of time was finding mental sanctuary in an animal that operates entirely outside of human time. Unitas exists only in the present moment, consumed with the continuous, singular task of being a sheep. There are no deadlines, no complex schedules, and no need to synchronize watches with other sheep. She is the ultimate embodiment of timeless focus. And you, the quiet observer, are invited to settle into that same rhythm. Let the imagined sounds of Unitas's quiet, continuous movements, the gentle swish of the tail, the deep, steady inhale, replace the frantic internal chatter of your own modern life. This is the moment where the intellectual chaos of a revolutionary mind finds rest in the earthy, repetitive peace of the barnyard. We fast forward our historical journey again, leaving the quaint quietude of Bern for the bustling, electric intensity of Berlin in the late 1920s. Unitas has long since passed, but her legacy lives on in her descendant, the magnificently calm Unitarian, now installed in Einstein's Berlin study as our gentle guide. Berlin in 1928 was a capital of fierce modernity, flashing lights, and intellectual ferment. The challenges facing Einstein had grown exponentially. His quest for the unified field theory was now a legendary, almost mythical pursuit, frustrating and consuming him. The dualistic chaos of the world, the split between quantum mechanics and general relativity, the political fragmentation of the Weimar Republic, was intensifying. He needed his monist anchor more than ever. You accompany Einstein on one of his daily, highly unusual walks. He is not walking a dog. He is walking Unitarian, the sheep, on a thick, quiet rope across one of the city's bustling thoroughfares, perhaps the Reichstag's Ufer Bridge. The contrast is immediate and highly comedic. Trams rattle, motorcars backfire, and well-dressed city dwellers rush past, worried about their latest stock investments or their next scientific paper. And here, in the midst of it all, is the towering genius, trailing a perfectly placid, woolly creature that seems entirely unaware of the speed of light or the volatility of the German mark. The sight puzzles onlookers. They are seeing a brilliant mind engaged in what appears to be whimsical absurdity. But you, the informed observer, understand the true, profound purpose. Einstein isn't walking the sheep for exercise. He's walking Unitarian for grounding. The sheep, in its absolute refusal to be hurried, is imposing its own slower, unified rhythm onto the frantic chaos of the city. Unitarian moves with an enviable, continuous pace, a living, soft break on the momentum of the modern world. Every gentle tap-tap of its hooves on the cobblestones is a reminder of the steady, earthbound continuity that underpins all the chaotic energy he's trying to tame in his equations. This exercise is a literal application of the unified field concept. Einstein is intentionally forcing the field of the chaotic city, with its dualistic noise, speed, and fragmentation, to interact with the field of Unitarian's singular, persistent calm. He is demonstrating to himself that no matter how fast or complicated the world gets, the simple, unified reality of existence persists at the end of the rope. Honestly, most modern folks wouldn't make it past breakfast in this environment without checking their phones, but Einstein has Unitarian. He is finding focus and unity by deliberately bringing the symbol of simplicity into the lair of complexity. Settle into the sheep's slow, unwavering stride. Let the rhythm of its hooves become a steady, comforting drum against the background hum of the city. You are safe here, walking slowly, protected by the woolly certainty of monism. You continue to walk alongside Einstein and Unitarian, observing how the sheep's presence functions as a living, gentle paradox against the noise of Berlin. The physicist is searching for the unified field, an abstract concept that would elegantly link all the forces of nature. And yet, right here, he has a tangible, physical unifying field around him, one made not of energy or gravity, but of calmness and continuity. Think of the sheep as a walking, breathing zero-point reference. Everything that happens around Unitarian, the blare of a horn, the shouted headline from a newsboy, the frantic calculation unfolding in Einstein's mind, is measured against the creature's singular, continuous state of being. The sheep is the unseen field that grounds the great thinker in simple, earthly permanence. It is a historical example of what modern psychology might call a grounding object, but with deep, philosophical underpinnings. When Einstein looked at his equations, he was trying to imagine a single fabric that everything belonged to. When he looked at Unitarian, he was seeing that fabric in motion, a continuous biological loop. The gentle sway of the wool, the rhythmic chew, the steady breath, it was all one process, uninterrupted and indivisible. This is the playful elegance of their partnership. The greatest struggle of his professional life was to prove that all things are one. The solution, he found, lay in occasionally abandoning the abstract struggle and anchoring his mind to the physical, undeniable truth that this sheep is one. It's a moment of mental surrender, a quiet acknowledgement that the simplest truth can be the most profound. This sheep is entirely uninterested in the dualism that plagued Einstein's work, the sharp divide between particle and wave, space and time, or matter and energy. Unitarian simply exists, embodying a perfect, unified whole where eating and breathing and being are all part of the same continuous event. The monist training meant the sheep was bred not just to be calm, but to be unambiguous in its presence. The air around Unitarian feels palpably different, softer, even in the middle of a busy Berlin street. It's a localized field of serenity. When Einstein feels his mind beginning to scatter, chasing after the elusive quantum randomness that he famously distrusted, a single glance at Unitarian's tranquil face pulls him back. It's an enforced simplicity, a way of resetting his mental compass to the principle of one. Honestly, most of us could use a monist sheep in our lives. A slow, physical reminder to stop trying to solve the universe and just focus on the rhythmic rise and fall of our own breathing. Settle deeper into the quietude of this realization. You are safe here, walking at the sheep's unhurried pace, absorbing its low-frequency, high-impact calm. The complexity of the world is momentarily held at bay by a gentle, woolly shield. As the day turns to dusk in Berlin, and Einstein retreats to his study, you remain a quiet witness to the peculiar details of his life with the monist sheep. A gentle mystery unfolds concerning a recurring anecdote that floated around the neighborhood, the story of the night watchman who swore he heard Einstein talking about fluffy constants to his sheep. This is a classic piece of historical uncertainty, a story too charming to be entirely untrue, yet too anecdotal to be verifiable. The story goes that a watchman, making his rounds late at night, would frequently see a light burning in Einstein's study. Peering in, he would see the famous professor not at his blackboard, but kneeling by the hay bale, quietly addressing Unitarian. The watchman's account, passed down through various staff members, claimed that Einstein was not reciting equations, but having what sounded like a philosophical monologue with the animal. The specific phrase that stuck was fluffy constants. The watchman, who understood nothing of physics, assumed this meant something to do with the sheep's wool, which was undeniably very fluffy and quite constant in its presence. But you, the informed listener, understand the profound double meaning. The watchman was entirely correct in his observation, if not his interpretation. Einstein was likely meditating on the very nature of constants in physics, those unchanging, fixed values like the speed of light c or Planck's constant h. These constants are the unmoving anchors of the physical universe, the singular values that unify all measurements. And Unitarian, the monist sheep, was his living, fluffy constant. The animal's slow, unified rhythm, its resistance to change, its continuous flow, was a physical, observable manifestation of the very stability he needed to find in his abstract equations. He was likely talking about how the idea of a constant, the sheer persistence of a fixed value, was perfectly embodied in the fixed, gentle routine of the sheep. It's a gentle, humorous moment. Imagine the genius whispering, "You, my fluffy constant, you are the single, undeniable one against which all my relative measurements must find rest." The mystery here is a light-hearted one. Did Einstein actually use that phrase? Or did the weary night watchman simply mishear fundamental constants as fluffy constants? The historical record is silent, but the narrative purpose is clear. This sheep was so central to his need for grounding that he personified it as the very thing he was searching for in the cosmos: unwavering, singular unity. The air in the study is now dim, lit only by a single lamp and the soft ambient glow of the city outside. The rhythmic sound of Unitarians chewing is the most constant thing in the room. Let that gentle, repetitive whisper of the fluffy constant become the focus of your own rest. It's a sweet, quiet secret shared between a genius, a sheep, and the pursuit of unified simplicity. As you settle deeper into the quiet historical space of Einstein's Berlin study, let's focus on the auditory environment created by the monist sheep, Unitarian. It's a key part of the creature's therapeutic value and a perfect example of gentle wordplay in the history of science. The principle is simple, the principle of least bar tian. In physics, the principle of least action is a foundational idea, stating that the path taken by a physical system between 2 points is the one that minimizes the action, a mathematical quantity. Essentially, the universe prefers the most efficient, least complicated route. Unitarian, the monist sheep, applied this principle to mental complexity. The sheep was bred and trained for minimal, repetitive sound. When it was necessary for Unitarian to make noise, the sound, a soft, low bar, was always brief, quickly resolved, and immediately followed by a return to the continuous, quiet rhythm of chewing. This lack of vocal chatter, this commitment to least bar tian, was highly effective in clearing Einstein's mind. Think of your own brain when you're overwhelmed. It's full of distracting mental noise, the competing voices of ideas, worries, and half-formed arguments. Einstein's mind, grappling with the universe, was no different. He needed a way to force his internal landscape to mimic the universe's preference for least complication. The sheep provided this low-frequency auditory field. The sound of its rhythmic, quiet chewing was a gentle, continuous hum, a white noise of unity that naturally filtered out the high-frequency, chaotic internal debates. The infrequent, soft bar was simply a brief, resolved interruption, immediately pulling the acoustic environment back to the steady rhythm of the jaw. This is where the gentle humor resides. The most powerful intellect of the age was relying on an animal bred for philosophical silence to achieve mental clarity. It's a living, breathing noise-canceling system powered by hay. If Unitarian had been a noisy, demanding animal, constantly interrupting the steady flow with chaotic bleating, the entire monist experiment would have failed. The philosophical training worked precisely because the sheep learned to reduce its action, its output of energy and noise, to the absolute minimum required for existence. You are now in a perfectly optimized auditory environment for rest. The only sound is the consistent, rhythmic chop-chop of digestion, the softest of breathing, and the silence that the principle of least bar tian enforces. Let that steady, continuous sound wash over your own scattered thoughts. It is the sound of the universe settling on the simplest path, the most efficient route to rest. Let your own mental action minimize now, following the gentle, profound guidance of Unitarian. At this point in our journey, standing quietly beside Einstein and his monist sheep, we must pause for a gentle historical pivot. The scene is one of highly philosophical livestock, but it touches upon a far older folk tradition, the practice of counting sheep to induce sleep. Unitarian, in a way, is the culmination of millennia of simple, pastoral remedies for sleeplessness. This tradition is surprisingly ancient, tracing its origins back not to specific scientific studies, but to ancient pastoral societies where sheep were the most common and predictable element of daily life. For shepherds, the sight and sound of their flock moving slowly and rhythmically was a natural part of their daily wind down. When struggling to sleep, they simply replicated that mental scene. The earliest written references suggesting this method date back to medieval Spain, but the concept is almost certainly older, rooted in Roman and even Greek agricultural practices. It's an intuitive solution. The mind, when plagued by complex worries or abstract thoughts, craves simple, repeatable, linear input. Counting sheep is the perfect mental antidote to chaos because it requires just enough focus to stop your mind from wandering into anxiety, but not so much focus that you stay awake. The sheer uniformity of a flock is the key. Every sheep looks essentially the same. Their movement is predictable, and the act of counting them is linear, continuous, and requires no judgment or problem-solving. It's an easy, low-stakes task for a tired brain. And here is where the modern science of Einstein intersects with ancient folk wisdom. The Monist Sheep Association, though unaware of the specific history, was simply formalizing and philosophizing this ancient method. They bred Unitarian and her ancestors to be the most count-worthy sheep possible, the ultimate embodiment of uniformity, continuity, and predictability. They turned a simple folk remedy into a philosophical exercise in unity. Einstein's use of Unitarian, therefore, is a high-concept evolution of this old trick. He wasn't just counting them to lull himself into unconsciousness. He was using the inherent unity of the animal's existence to force his mind away from the dualistic, fragmenting nature of his physics problems. He was using the repetitive, simple truth of the sheep to find a unified field in his own thoughts, which then naturally led to a state of rest. The quiet, rhythmic sound of Unitarians chewing is the same gentle, mental rhythm that shepherds found thousands of years ago. You are witnessing a beautiful historical loop, the most advanced scientific mind of the 20th century finding solace in a method that is utterly timeless and utterly simple. Let the quiet weight of this long tradition settle over you. There's nothing new under the sun, even when it comes to the complex science of rest. The soft presence of the Monist sheep connects you to the deep, slow rhythm of history itself. We return to the Berlin study in 1928, maintaining our quiet vigil near the Monist sheep, Unitarian. You now have the privilege of observing a small, highly significant historical moment, a visit from Max Planck, the originator of quantum theory and one of Einstein's most respected, if occasionally philosophically opposed, friends. The meeting is about the escalating tensions between general relativity, Einstein's smooth, continuous view of the universe, and quantum mechanics, Planck's own creation, a jagged, discontinuous view of energy. The room is thick with intense, quiet debate. Planck, known for his formality and precision, is standing near the blackboard, gesticulating gently. Einstein is sitting back, his expression a mixture of profound respect and playful stubbornness. And Unitarian is entirely, blissfully unimpressed. The Monist sheep, the constant in the room, is a living embodiment of the continuity that Einstein craves. Planck, meanwhile, is the father of discontinuity, the idea that energy comes in discrete, measurable packets, quanta. The philosophical split between the two men is physically represented by the sheer, unwavering flow of the sheep's existence versus the idea of the universe happening in sharp, countable jumps. Unitarian is, in this moment, the perfect woolly witness. The sheep demonstrates, through its slow, continuous rhythm of chewing and breathing, that flow is possible. It's an unconscious but powerful visual argument for Einstein's side of the debate. It is a living analog of the continuous field. During the height of the discussion, Planck pauses, wiping a bit of chalk dust from his fingers. He glances at the sheep, a momentary flicker of dry amusement in his serious eyes. He is, after all, a man of science, but he understands his friend's eccentricities. Then comes the gentle, amusing punchline of the scene. The great theoretical physicist of the quantum world reaches into his pocket, finds a small, forgotten crumb of pastry left over from his journey, and drops it. Unitarian, the embodiment of philosophical unity, which had ignored the entirety of the high-level debate about the structure of the cosmos, immediately shows keen, focused interest in the crumb. It's a beautiful, light joke played by reality. The sheep, bred for ultimate philosophical purity, is quickly pulled from its continuous monist state by a tiny piece of discontinuous, sugary matter. It reminds the observer that even the most unified existence is governed by simple material needs. It cuts the intellectual tension in the room instantly. Both physicists share a momentary, silent smile. The sheep is not only a philosophical anchor, but also a master of situational humor. The sensory detail here is the soft, snuffling sound Unitarian makes as it investigates the floor. It's a brief, delightful distraction. Let the rhythm of the debate, the high-level intellectual tension, and the sudden, silly intervention of the sheep's appetite all fade into the quiet background. Focus only on the gentle, even pulse of the creature's breathing. We now dip into a fascinating, gentle historical uncertainty concerning Unitas, the original monist you who guided the young Einstein in Bern. We know she arrived anonymously from the Bavarian Schaffsichtverein, a gift meant to promote the philosophy of unity. But the precise circumstances of her arrival, the specific logistics, have never been entirely settled in the few existing records. It remains a beautiful, low-stakes historical question. Was the original sheep a gift, a purchase, or did it simply wander onto Einstein's Bern property one snowy morning? The dominant theory, which aligns with the philosophical zeal of the Verein, is the anonymous gift scenario. A large crate, labeled cryptically, arriving by rail to the confused patent clerk. This aligns perfectly with the farmer's desire for their monist principle to spread without seeking personal credit or financial gain. They wanted the idea to take root, not the credit for the animal. However, a conflicting account, often repeated in local Bern folklore and occasionally noted in minor historical letters, suggests a far simpler, more whimsical origin, the wandering ewe hypothesis. The story goes that one particularly snowy morning in 1904, a single, incredibly calm sheep was found sheltering under the small porch of the Einstein apartment. She was clean, well-fed, and possessed an unnervingly serene disposition. The young Einstein, amused by the sheer audacity of a sheep appearing as if delivered by the universe itself, simply took her in. This wandering ewe story has an irresistible appeal because it speaks to Einstein's profound belief in the orderliness of nature. He spent his life searching for a universe that was not random but deeply interconnected and rational. A perfectly trained, monist sheep simply appearing on his doorstep would have felt like a confirmation of that deep, underlying order, a synchronicity between the physical world and his philosophical quest. It would have been the ultimate, gentle manifestation of the unified field he sought. The least popular, but most mundane theory is the simple purchase, a transaction handled by his wife, Milva, to acquire a lawn mower or a food source. This theory is quickly dismissed because it lacks the gentle poetry and philosophical depth required to explain why the sheep stayed and became a central focus of his later work. No, the origin had to be either an intentional, anonymous philosophical gesture or a whimsical, nature-driven accident. The beautiful mystery here is that it doesn't matter which is true. The sheep's philosophical utility was immediate and profound regardless of the method of delivery. But the uncertainty lingers, a quiet debate in the background of history. Did Einstein choose unity, or did unity choose him? As you rest here, let that gentle uncertainty wash over you. It's a question with no settled answer, a soft, intellectual mystery that requires no solution. Just focus on the sheep's quiet breathing, the only undeniable truth in this room, a steady rhythm that transcends the messy details of its own historical provenance. We return to the Berlin study, where the air is now thick with the scent of night and old ideas. Einstein, having wrestled with the twin demons of gravity and electromagnetism all day, needs his anchor. Unitarian, the monist sheep, is not just a psychological aid. The creature functions as a gentle gravity well for his mind. In physics, a gravity well is a conceptual term. A massive object warps spacetime around it, drawing in other objects. Einstein's mind, constantly soaring into the abstract realms of spacetime curvature and particle behavior, was highly unstable, prone to scattering into 1,000 confusing pieces. Unitarian, however, possesses a simple, singular, and irresistible mass of calm. The sheep's simple existence acts like a miniature, personal gravitational pull, drawing Einstein's overactive mind back to a single, stable point of rest. The moment his thoughts begin to spiral out into complex, intractable mathematical knots, his gaze lands on the woolly form, and he is gently, but firmly, pulled back to the earthly continuity of one. This is the deeper, playful meaning of the monist approach. The monist farmers believed in the unity of mind and matter. Einstein, by focusing on the physical, material presence of Unitarian, was giving his mental energy a physical object to orbit. Instead of chasing the elusive, dualistic particles of the quantum world, he focuses on the sheep, a solid, undeniable, unified entity. The physical posture of the sheep reinforces this idea. Unitarian is usually settled, dense, and quiet, a perfect picture of equilibrium. It is the opposite of the high-energy, chaotic state of subatomic particles. When Einstein looks at the sheep, he's observing a system in its state of least possible energy, the state that the universe naturally prefers. This is the low-energy ground state for his own overstimulated brain. The beauty of a gravity well is that it doesn't force anything, it simply exerts a pull. Unitarian doesn't demand attention or command rest. The sheep simply exists with such profound, unwavering continuity that the human mind naturally wants to fall into its orbit. The gentle, rhythmic breathing you observe is the sound of the universe seeking stability, and Einstein's mind, watching it, is following suit. Most modern folks try to achieve this stability with apps and guided meditations, but Einstein had a real, live, woolly gravitational field generator right in his study. Settle into the safety of this gentle gravity well. Feel the pull toward continuity, away from complexity, and let your own thoughts begin to orbit the singular, rhythmic presence of the monist sheep. As the gentle gravity well of the monist sheep, Unitarian, holds Einstein's scattered thoughts in orbit, we focus now on the most powerful element of its therapeutic effect, the soft, repetitive sound of its chewing. This is not merely a noise. It is a gentle, auditory loop that, for Einstein, mimicked the vast, continuous expanse of space and time he was attempting to describe. Imagine the sound now in the quiet of the Berlin study, a soft, almost frictionless grind, pause. It is incredibly steady, a perfect metronome of biological continuity. Unlike the irregular, fast-paced tick of a clock or the sudden clatter of a passing tram, the sheep's chewing is slow, deep, and continuous. It is an analog experience in a world rapidly becoming digital and discontinuous. For a mind steeped in the concepts of the infinite and the continuous, concepts that defy easy visualization, this sound provided a physical, audible representation of those abstract truths. The sheep chews hay, a process of breaking down the continuous structure of grass into an even more continuous, unified flow of sustenance. The sound itself is the audio track of unity in action. When Einstein was struggling with the geometry of space-time, the idea that space and time are fused into a single, flowing continuum, he could look at Unitarian and hear the sound of the continuous field. The repetitive sound is an echo of the universe's most fundamental patterns, the orbits of planets, the oscillation of light, the steady expansion of the cosmos. Everything moves in a predictable, continuous cycle, and the sheep's chewing is the most accessible, low-fidelity example of this cosmic rhythm. The psychological effect is profound. Your brain, listening to this gentle loop, is receiving a constant, simple message. All is flow, all is predictable, all is unified. There are no sharp edges in this soundscape, no demanding interruptions, just the smooth, constant rhythm of existence. It naturally pulls the listener, and the genius physicist, out of the high-tension, analytical mindset and into a state of passive, rhythmic observation. The humor in this lies in the contrast. The man contemplating the curvature of a four-dimensional manifold is finding his mental cue in the two-dimensional, repetitive action of a cud-chewing sheep. It's a beautiful historical truth. The infinite can be understood, and peace found, not in the complexities of the blackboard, but in the simplest, most persistent rhythms of the natural world. Settle your mind now into that sound. Let the gentle grind of the hay become the soft, continuous hum of the cosmos, pulling you toward a state of profound rest. The late hour in the Berlin study provides the perfect context for the monist sheep's final, most critical function. Einstein once noted a curious pattern. His most significant breakthroughs often occurred not during the frenetic, focused activity of calculation, but immediately after waking, in that quiet, liminal space between sleep and full consciousness. He attributed the quiet mental processing necessary for this insight to the rhythm of his monist guide. The sheep, Unitarian, was the gatekeeper to the philosophical nap. When Einstein consciously retired from the blackboard, his mind was still buzzing, full of the dualistic conflict he sought to resolve. The act of falling asleep needed to be a deliberate, mental transition from complexity to simplicity. He wouldn't simply close his eyes. He would shift his focus entirely to Unitarian. By focusing on the sheep's slow, continuous breathing, the visual rhythm of the woolly side rising and falling, the soft hush of the air, he was performing a final, gentle act of mental unification. He was consciously directing his thoughts to a process that was utterly simple, repetitive, and entirely one in its purpose. The theory was this: complex ideas, like a knot in a rope, often resist force, but yield to steady, gentle pressure. By letting Unitarian's continuous rhythm be the last input before sleep, Einstein was ensuring that his subconscious mind began its nightly work from a starting point of unity, not fragmentation. The monist training ensured the sheep was the perfect instrument for this. Its existence was the living null hypothesis, the simple, unified reality that required no further explanation. This is why the best ideas came after waking. While Einstein slept, the gentle, repetitive, unified rhythm he had established in the last moments, before unconsciousness continued to exert a passive influence. His subconscious mind, instead of running amok with worries and fragmented calculations, was quietly following the continuous, slow-motion template provided by the sheep. The unification of ideas was achieved not by a forceful calculation, but by a quiet, rhythmic mental alignment with the most unified object in the room. It's a marvelous piece of gentle self-management. He wasn't relying on genius alone. He was relying on the gentle, low-effort persistence of a farm animal to structure his internal world. The sheep didn't solve the equations. The sheep created the mental environment where the solution could gently surface. You are watching the ultimate power of rhythm over chaos. Settle into the safety of this deep, purposeful rest, letting Unitarian soft presence guide your own mind toward a peaceful, unified quietude. Our journey through Einstein's quiet Berlin study continues, and the calendar has turned to late spring. This brings us to a crucial, highly symbolic and sensory event in the life of the monist sheep, the annual shearing. This isn't just routine animal husbandry. It is, for Einstein, a physical, observable metaphor for the intellectual process of shedding complexity. Just as a theoretical physicist must strip away complicated, unnecessary variables in a search for the core, unifying equation, Unitarian is stripped of its heavy, chaotic winter coat to reveal the simple, continuous form beneath. You watch the process. It is slow, deliberate, and highly sensory. The air becomes thick with the scent of lanolin and clean wool. The sound of the shears, a rhythmic, gentle snip, 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 is a variation on the monist rhythm, a new, equally predictable pattern of continuous, low-level action. The sheep stands utterly still, trained for placidity, embodying the philosophical concept of unmoving unity even during this profound external change. The wool comes away in large, dense, shaggy mats. Each mat represents a bundle of unnecessary variables. The weight of the fleece, which was once chaotic and disorganized, lies on the floor, now separate from the singular core entity of the sheep. As the process continues, Unitarian's shape is revealed to be simpler, sleeker, and more essential. The complex, layered surface is gone, leaving only the basic, continuous form. Einstein often observed this process, finding it immensely clarifying. He saw the shearing as a physical reminder of the principle of economy, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. The universe, like the sheep, should be described in the most lean, elegant, and continuous way possible. The wool, in all its chaotic, unnecessary volume, was the dualistic clutter he needed to eliminate from his unified field theory. There's a playful layer to this as well. For a few days after shearing, Unitarian looks almost comically exposed and streamlined, a minimalist sheep, perfectly aligned with the elegant simplicity Einstein sought in physics. It's a visual joke that only the philosopher-scientist could truly appreciate. He sees not an animal, but an empirical demonstration of Occam's razor, the idea that entities should not be multiplied unnecessarily, in action. Settle into the quiet, rhythmic sound of the shearing. Let that continuous snip, snip become the sound of your own mind shedding the excessive variables, the complex worries, and the unnecessary thoughts that cling to your day. You are participating in a historical moment of profound, cleansing simplicity, guided by the quiet perseverance of the monist sheep. The core, unified truth is always the simplest one. As the last remnants of the winter fleece are swept away, and Unitarian stands in a state of lean, continuous elegance, we can finally articulate the profound, subtle lesson the monist sheep offered Albert Einstein. While the physicist spent his life seeking a theory of everything, a single equation to explain the universe, the sheep merely embodied the theory of everything else. What is the everything else? It is the unity that exists beneath the intellectual struggle. It is the simple, continuous, non-dualistic reality that is often overlooked in the frenzy of analytical thought. The sheep's existence was and is a demonstration of unity through its continuous, unassuming reality. The sheep's theory has two core components, easy for the mind to follow and anchor upon. First, the principle of low-effort continuity. Unitarian never exerts unnecessary effort. Every movement, every breath, every chew is performed with the minimum possible energy to achieve a continuous state of existence. This teaches the observer that profound truths can be found not through maximum exertion and intellectual strain, but through sustained, gentle flow. When Einstein struggled, the sheep showed him that the solution lay in less force and more continuity. Second, the undeniable monism of the present moment. The sheep is always and only one entity, occupying one moment in time, engaged in one simple process. It doesn't struggle with the past, nor anticipate the future. Its reality is perfectly unified within the present. When Einstein's mind would fragment into the dualities of past failure and future ambition, the sheer, undeniable reality of Unitarian's placid, present existence pulled him back to the single, unified moment. This is the profound, quiet irony of our historical setting. The genius was searching for unity in the terrifying complexity of the cosmos, while the answer, the anchor he needed to keep his mind steady, was residing right beside him in the beautiful, simple reality of an animal bred to be one. The sheep proved that the monist principle wasn't an abstract theory. It was a way of being. Unitarian's theory of everything else is simply this: everything is one, and that one is constant. It's a philosophical shortcut that bypassed the need for complex mathematics and appealed directly to the human need for stability. You are witnessing the quiet triumph of simplicity over chaos. Let your own mind surrender to this gentle logic. There is no need to calculate or struggle. The only requirement is to align your thoughts with the gentle, rhythmic reality of the monist guide. Feel the stability of the sheep's low-effort continuity settle over you. The day is finally drawing to a close, and a warm, sleepy light is filling Einstein's Berlin study. We have reached the final stage of our focused observation, standing with the genius and his monist sheep as the sun sets. The golden light streams through the high window, bathing the hay bale and the woolly form of Unitarian in a tranquil, orange glow. The air is still, carrying only the faintest whisper of the city settling down for the night. The scent of old paper and hay is intensified by the warmth of the setting sun, creating a distinctly cozy, historical aroma. This is the moment when the intellectual battle of the day must cease, and the unified field of rest must take over. Einstein is sitting in his armchair, not writing, but simply observing Unitarian, who is now fully settled on the fresh straw. The shadow of the sheep stretches long across the wooden floor, a dark, continuous, unhurried shape that seems to visually confirm the monist principle. The complex equations on the blackboard are now merely indecipherable scribbles in the fading light. They have surrendered their command. This is a profoundly quiet moment of acceptance. The unified theory has not been found today. The dualistic battles of the universe still rage. But here, In this small pocket of Berlin, the mind of the great scientist has found its own unified solution, the unity of rest. The warmth of the sunset is a physical sensation of the calm washing over the room. It's a sensory signal to both the man and the animal that the cycle is complete, and the time for simple, continuous being has arrived. You can feel the tension draining from the room, replaced by a deep, earthy sense of stability and flow. Unitarian shifts slightly, a gentle, almost silent movement that simply reinforces the continuity of its presence. The sheep is not thinking of the future, it is not reliving the brief drama of the pastry crumb. It is simply sinking deeper into its own rhythm. You are witnessing a master class in letting go. The complexities of science, the anxieties of the era, and the frustrating struggle for cosmic truth are all gently, firmly put aside. The final, unifying force of the day is the simplest one, the quiet demand for sleep. Settle into the beautiful, unifying warmth of this historical sunset. Let the quiet presence of the monist sheep be the soft, unwavering beacon guiding you out of the day's complexities. As the last rays of the sun vanish, and the Berlin study is draped in the deep velvet of twilight, the narrative itself begins to slow down. We are transitioning from observation to embodiment, allowing the rhythm of the monist sheep to fully take over. The goal now is not to learn history, but to drift into it. Einstein has closed his eyes, his breathing already deepening. Your attention and the focus of the historical moment now rests entirely on Unitarian. The rhythm of the monist sheep is no longer just a philosophical concept, it is the physical mechanism of rest. Focus on the rhythmic rise and fall of the sheep's woolly side. It's a slow, steady, mesmerizing wave of gentle motion. Rise, hold, fall, pause. This is the physical, continuous flow that Einstein sought to emulate in his own mind. It is the visible proof that continuity is the most peaceful state of existence. The air is cool now, the silence in the study is profound, broken only by this soft, consistent breathing. Every breath the sheep takes is a measurement of stillness, a unit of pure, unadulterated presence. There is no urgency in this room, no demand for complexity. There is only the continuous, gentle pulse of life at its most unified and calm. Imagine the wool itself. It's soft, dense, and perfectly uniform, the texture a visual manifestation of the undivided field. The deep shadows smooth out any lingering sharp edges in the room, making every object seem softer, rounder, and more continuous. The world is becoming one undifferentiated field of gentle dark and soft sound. You are experiencing a form of historical hypnagogia, that transitional state where the mind is neither fully awake nor asleep, suspended in a gentle, rhythmic flow. The repetition is the key. You are not counting sheep, you are simply observing the one sheep and its continuous, singular rhythm, over and over. Let your own breathing naturally synchronize with the slow, deep rhythm of Unitarian. Inhale, slow and continuous. Exhale, long and steady. Feel the gentle pull toward the earth, the slow, downward momentum of a mind that has found its anchor. The gentle drift into the field of sleep is continuous, like the slow, quiet expansion of the unified field of the night sky. This is the final section of our journey. The Berlin study is completely dark now, the only light being the subtle, ambient glow of the city filtering through the window. A gentle, continuous light, like the glow of a distant star. Einstein is completely asleep, his breathing now long, deep, and steady, having finally achieved his own personal unified field of rest, guided by the monist sheep. Unitarian, the quiet, woolly sentinel, has also settled fully for the night. The breathing remains the only sound, a soft, unwavering rhythm that defines the stillness of the room. It is the most constant, reliable sound in the universe right now. You, too, are sinking into that same profound stillness. The worries of the day, the complexities of the world, the mathematical knots, all are momentarily solved by quiet. The monist sheep has done its job. It has unified the space, the time, and the focus of the mind into one singular, continuous state of deep peace. Each breath is slower than the last. The night leans closer, embracing the quiet. You are safe in this historical space, protected by the simple, undeniable presence of continuous being. There is nothing left to do tonight. No equation to solve, no variable to eliminate. You have found the ultimate principle of simplicity. Imagine the candlelight fading, leaving behind only the gentle, persistent glow of the moon. Picture rivers flowing under that moonlight, their movement continuous and smooth, just like the sheep's breathing. Look up and see the stars gather overhead, a vast, complex, but ultimately unified field of light. All is whole, all is continuous, all is rest. The gentle gravity well holds you perfectly still. The fluffy constant is your guide. The unifying moment of rest is here. Let the final, rhythmic pulse of the monist sheep carry you over the threshold. Sweet dreams.